when you then go and climb up something, and let's say there is like a knife that is on the surface there where you kind of reach and you're like almost there, and you grab the knife and you grab it like right next to your ear, then we made like a special kind of sound for that, and actually put a contact mic on the knife and made it like really close, really big, like very like in your face, and the audio director loved that, that he was so amazed by this effect that when you do that, you actually feel that it's like in your ear,
Foley is the craft of recording and performing everyday sounds like footsteps, cloth movement, and object interactions to make on-screen worlds feel real. Today I'm joined by Foley artist Bastien Gerner, who has worked across AAA games, film, and television, including several years at Ubisoft, and who can tell us much, much more about the art and craft of Foley. Bastien, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Alessandro.
So, for people outside the industry, did I define Foley well? How would you explain it to someone that doesn't or has never heard of it before, but has probably seen it or experienced it in games all the time, right?
I think you explained it well. There's maybe one piece missing, which is everyday sounds performed to the moving image. So many Foley artists are very particular about this, that Foley is only if it's performed live to the moving image. And that is also something where we can start a discussion if you want, because when we talk about video games, I am maybe booked as a Foley artist, but sometimes I just get a piece of art or like like something that is not finished. It's just an image or something, and I should now go ahead and make some sounds for that to be used. And also when we talk about footsteps, that's like the classical thing, and at least 1/3 of our daily work. We do the footsteps for movies, and then we have all the different surfaces and types of shoes and types of emotion that the character has when they're walking. And in a game, it is not that linear. The player decides how to actually move, and therefore you have a complete different system behind it in the game. And when we record then footsteps for a game, we then maybe have a game capture, but it is just to cater the system. So we have the character walking normal speed for like whatever 1 minute, and then it starts running for 1 minute, and then it just starts jumping and landing 50 times, and then we do those movements in sync to the image, and then okay, it's real Foley. But what if we do just the sound for something that is not a moving image? Is it then still Foley or just a sound effect?
Okay. So let me kind of break down like the idea of sound design. On one hand, you have the actual kind of programming of how audio is heard by the player or the experience, and you're kind of, there's the obfuscation, like overlap between other sounds. And then there's the actual kind of Foley design itself, which is the footsteps. And is it stomping? Is it running? Is it jumping? And when we say Foley, it's that. It's the recording of the actual sound, but it's reference to an image usually. And you're kind of creating all those different dynamics, because I would imagine the human brain is, if you hear the same footstep in a game and you're constantly running, you start noticing that it's repetitive or it's not dynamic, right? So it's that art that people don't notice it, but it gives so much immersion.
100%. That's in general a golden rule in audio. When nobody notices it, then you did a great job. Usually people start complaining when they kind of spot something that's wrong in the audio. No one really says, "Oh, this was great audio when I watched this movie or played this game." So yeah, the immersion is really the key element that we have to talk about when we talk about games in general, but also when we talk about sound for games. And as you said, there are so many different elements that play together in a game, and you have maybe technical restrictions and voice count and all these things. So that's something very specific to games, that you have a system that communicates with the game engine, mostly a middleware, an extra software that is connected with the game engine. And then audio events are being played and triggered in the game. And we can handle all those individual sounds and make them sound either close or distant, or we can also filter out what is important right now for the player and let the game only play those sounds and forget about other sounds that could potentially also be triggered at that moment.
Okay, so can you walk me through that process? Because I've seen some of your videos, and it's like it's exactly what the audience would expect. You're putting microphones up to like shoes or cloths, and you're trying to create these unique sounds. But how do you know what sound works for what image? Like that's a very intuitive art that like you need to learn to make it sound right. And I imagine there's a whole trial and process for kind of learning how to do it.
So yeah, there's a few layers to this. As a Foley artist, I started to practice on movies, and I started to train myself to get that experiential knowledge about what sounds works in a movie context. And therefore we were trained, or I was trained, and I'm still wired to this, that what do I have to do in order that it blends into the scene? So I'm working with perspectives. I'm trying to, not only perform my sound in the right way, but also maybe place the microphone in a specific way and use certain treatments like filters, cutting away the high end so that it sounds more muffled. And therefore it already integrates into the image. So when you see someone walking, you feel kind of that the footstep sound comes from the lower third of the image, and it doesn't feel that it's in your face where the dialogue actually has to happen. And that is the first thing I had to unlearn when working in games, because I got the feedback from my lead sound designers. Yeah, the sounds are great, but we're missing a little bit of high end, and me coming from movies, I just answered them, yeah, I think it should be like that. And then after a small while, I understood in the game, you cannot pre-design the perspective, and that has to be handled by the middleware, as I said, because we cannot really 100% define a timeline like in a movie. And so that was the first thing I had to really unlearn, to not use my film knowledge in order what sounds works in the game context, and then recording much more flat, like no treatment, as much frequency bandwidth as possible. Maybe use even a high frequency microphone that covers frequencies up to 100 kilohertz, which the eye doesn't hear. But you can then use those material, this information from that microphone, and pitch sounds down and do crazy things with it in sound design. The main thing is that to understand what's really going on in the game is so complex, and I had to let go of all my knowledge. And then the thing is, with the games, you have those systems, and how are those systems being interactive with other systems in the game, animation and VFX and other gameplay mechanics. And those systems, they also play a role in how the audio actually works. So in games, it's much more a trial and error, and it's, I think, way harder to learn experimental knowledge that works for every game, because every game is differently designed. And therefore, you always have to get in touch with all the other departments. You have to be, as a Foley artist, in my case, close with the audio designers that design the systems. And then it's back and forth. You create some sounds, you put it into the system, you try and play and test it. And then you think, this is not really working. Let's try something else.
Because when you're playing a game, you have different, it's the same way like how you render the graphics. Depending on where you're facing or what actions you take, the game will through the engine, will create the sound or the visual in some unique way based on your action. But I like how you contrasted that to a movie, because a movie is like a set scene. Like, you know that the character's like in this perception, you're seeing him at this height from this scene, he's running through a forest. And so if I understood correctly, it's easier with a movie because you kind of have a more kind of one-dimensional way of creating that sound for that specific moment. But a game, there's all this dynamism that you have to experiment with, and it's tricky to get it right because then you also have an engine that needs to calculate based on what the player's doing, how the sound comes out and how it's displayed to the player.
Yes, it's true on the one hand, but on the other hand, working on movies is not easy, because to make it work right away when you do the work, when you like in the studio and record the sounds and you go through a scene, you walk that character, then you walk the next character, then you do the cloth movement, then you do all the handling that the character is doing, like everyday objects, what I have here on my desk. I'm currently working on a movie. So like
Okay.
leather equipment and glasses and cell phones. So you do all those sounds, and then to get it right away, so that after you're done, you press play, and it actually feels like it was always there. That is not easy. That is like years of experience and hard work and really a fine taste of what it actually needs to get this into this whole environment. In games, however, this knowledge doesn't help you as much. Still, you need this kind of taste for good sound, but you have to experiment more, because it's not a golden rule that it's every game is different and the mechanics are different, the systems are different, so therefore it's a bit more trial and error.
It's like an audio illusion, because like when I'm watching a movie and you see like maybe like a cowboy getting his gun outside of his pistol holder, there's like that leather sound that you just showed. The audience usually can't tell. They probably assume, oh yeah, that's the mic picking it up. It just sounds really good and perfect. But in reality, there is no sound coming out from that. Someone like you is coming in, picking the right sound for the right kind of time frame in that movement, and it just sounds perfect. But we don't see it. It's again, if it's good, you don't notice.
Yeah, it has to be believable. Sometimes there is also a sound coming from the production, but then we add to this sound maybe more high detailed things that make it even more believable, and less documentary sounding. And there's also a certain perception of the audience, like they expect certain things to sound in a certain way, especially when it comes to weapons. When you look at real weapons, usually they don't make this rattling noise that you know from movies or games, because they are like high precision, mechanical instruments that they shouldn't be rattling, otherwise you cannot aim properly, right? But in movies, you have that established for so many decades now, so that people are used to that and they're expecting that. And we can also tell the story with that way better, and therefore it's a good thing to my ears and to my taste, but it's not real.
So it's not just about conforming to reality. It's about conforming to what the audience is used to. Like, you know how like if you shoot a barrel in a movie, it explodes, but in reality they did that test. Or like if you actually just shoot a gun towards like a barrel full of oil or something, it wouldn't actually explode. It would just leak out. But we're used to that idea that if I shoot at something, like huge explosion. Same thing for sounds, right? Everyone is just expecting, because of decades and decades of movie history. We want that. If you don't get that, it just sounds weird. So I love how you're still trying to conform to ideals from the past, but you also need to make it sound realistic. And there's that balance of the two, like
Yeah,
expectations versus, yeah.
and every game is different. Even when we talk about weapons, you have games that are very true to the reality, and you have to come up really with the original sounds and the original weapons, because also the players expect that, and they know how those sounds, how those guns sound in real life. And then there are more story-driven games that are not as attached to realism as others, and then you can go a bit more rogue and design different things and be a bit more like, yeah, creative in a way.
And is this purely like based on your like? I imagine it's not just on your gut, but it's a big part of it. But are you like testing with players? Like, is there some kind of testing process where, like, let's say there's the next Team Fortress or Red Dead game where like there are new weapons, right? Or maybe Overwatch, and those weapons are kind of unique, and you need to come up with a sound for like a laser gun that like reloads like a shotgun, for instance. You can come up with like your best estimate of what you think that would sound like, but the audience then has to agree with it. Are you bringing people in to show them like, here's a demo of reloading and shooting this weapon? Does this sound right to you, or is that agreed internally?
That depends on the company, I believe.
Okay.
On a certain level, I think in AAA, you always have game labs that have testers come in and play the game and rate it and give feedback. That's common. At Ubisoft Düsseldorf, where I was working, we also built a huge facility especially for that, and then we had people come in and they were all monitored and tracked, and then they had to answer certain questions. And of course, those games are being tested also for sound and all the different elements.
So let's actually touch back then on how you got into Foley in the first place, because I read in your bio that you initially wanted to get into sound engineering and kind of have a rap career in
Yeah.
music. How did that go from kind of wanting to be like a hip hop artist all the way to eventually doing Foley for games and movies?
Yeah, hip hop and rap was the thing that I discovered as really like my first passion that I could not let go of, age 16 maybe. And with that, the interest of how a record is being produced came up. And then this question led to me exploring the whole field of music production and starting DJing and starting rapping and forming a group and performing on stage for many years, and also making my own records. And I then had my own kind of little music studio going very early on. I dropped out of school, and then this was my main goal to make this rap career going. And at the side, I was always kind of engineering and recording other artists or interning at a recording studio in order to get also this engineering career going. And at a certain point, maybe after 7 years, I switched priorities because it felt always like my music is the first priority, and therefore I never really made it as an engineer. When opportunities came up, I didn't use them properly because the music was more important. So I went for this instead of the whatever going on tour with an artist as a front of house mixer. And at a certain point, when I got married also early on, so we're talking about from 16 to 23, those 7 years, um, I then looked for something else in order to make a proper living and take on more responsibility now as I was married. And then film popped up in my head because that was the only thing I then thought I didn't really tackle in audio. Games weren't even in my radar on my radar back then. So then I wanted to study at a film university, try to prepare for the application test for 1 year, and then failed. Then I started looking out in the industry to get certain opportunities, and then I landed an apprenticeship at a very cool post-production facility in Berlin. It's called Basis Berlin, shoutouts. And there I could then convince them to take me on as an apprentice, and then I worked there for 2.5 years and learned all the necessary things about sound effects editing, dialogue editing, and mixing movies and all these things. Recording Foley, editing Foley was my main task, and also recording ADR with actors, so dialogue replacement. And that was the starting point for me. After those 2.5 years, I was then hired straight away into another company where I spent 7 years. And in those 7 years, I developed from being a sound effects editor to occasionally also being a re-recording mixer. So mixing the final mix of a movie, which is a great thing to do. And it's very difficult to get those credits. But as I was in-house there, I took those rare opportunities where no one actually wanted to do the job. I said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And then I progressed into becoming a Foley artist because the facility there in Berlin, they built new studios, and this was also including a recording studio. So I was asked basically if I wanted to become a Foley artist. And it was a good timing because the question came 2 years before the studio was ready. So in those 2 years, I could find myself a mentor, explore it a little bit, and then decide for myself, yes, I want to do this. And once the studio was there, I just started doing it full time and then never stopped for more than 10 years now.
I mean, man, you had a whole journey. Like you did it all in sound. Like you really have like the full experience. But why? What made you pick Foley as a craft? Besides the fact that you got offered that opportunity, like what stood out to you compared to like I think a lot of people interesting listening, especially those that are interested in sound, are thinking, all right, he could have toured of artists, he could have written his own records, he could have done sound mixing for movies, he could have done sound effects, and you kind of tried everything, and then Foley came up and you picked it. How come?
So the thing was, I found this mentor by just booking his mixing studio back then for a project I was working on. And then he was already not working as a Foley artist anymore, but also more mixing movies. But he was kind of this kind of old school Foley artist, OG, and he trained certain other Foley artists back in the 1990s already that are very successful up until this day. And so he was bragging about his Foley skills and how quick he can do a TV movie. And I was like thinking, no, this is not possible, because I was trained more on cinema movies back at Basis Berlin. So I had my thinking about this very complex Foley type of approach, and you need more time to do things properly. And he said, no, I can do it in 2 days, no problem. And you don't have to edit this. It's all done. We did this on tape back in the days. I can do this. And I said, okay, great. Then I'll bring my next movie and you do it and I will watch you. Okay, he said, done deal. We do this. And then I watched him the first time. I brought another film. Then I assisted him. And then he asked me to do something myself. So he after we were done with the shift, he then went to the other room and recorded me. So he said, take on this little sequence. It was a woman walking like a princess, starting slowly, then picking up the pace, running, going down some steps, and then stopping. So it's a bit of a complex thing to do. And I watched him just for a couple of days, he doing the thing. And I never touched Foley before myself. I edited tons of it over many years during my apprenticeship and my first years into the job, but I never did it myself. And I just did it. And then he said, okay, thank you. Can you do it again? I said, yeah, of course. Okay, I did it again. And then he said, man, I have to be honest with you, but you have a really great talent for this, I trained certain Foley artists in the past, but what you did here just off the bat, I never saw before. So that was giving me a lot of confidence already that, okay, this could be something for me. And it was also great fun. And then there was another type of thinking behind it, because there were like 2 routes for me that I could take. One was becoming a re-recording mixer. As I said, I collected a couple of credits, and that's kind of the true mastery of when you work on sound as a re-recording mixer. You're bringing everything together. It's very complex. You have to have a lot of social skills, bringing all the clients together to one thing that we all agree on and everyone is happy with that. So it's a lot of psychology going. It's kind of the top job that you can aspire to if you want to. Or I could now take on this and become a Foley artist. And then I thought, Foley is way more niche than re-recording mixer, because there are many, many re-recording mixers or sound designers who want to also mix movies, but there are very few Foley artists. And most of the Foley artists I knew back then were very old, and I was still pretty young compared. So I thought maybe from a career point of view, it would be more smart to go with the Foley route, because that will be much of a higher demand and very few supply when all those other older Foley artists go in retirement. And then the third reason for me was working on sound, designing sound on a computer is a lot of fun, but it's also a bit draining, because it's like an office job. You sit all day in front of your computer and do the creative work. As a Foley artist, however, I can, grab props from a shelf, operate with something, move my body, and I will always be kind of active. And the creative factor is even higher than just dropping sounds from a library into a timeline and adjusting them and tweaking them. And so, and as I'm coming from this sound engineering background, I also enjoy recording myself as a Foley artist. So I have also then hands on the microphones and on the little knobs here on my rack, and I can use some plugins and treat things further. So I now do all the things as a one-man show, which is also more lucrative because I can charge for me as a Foley artist, me as an engineer, and I can also charge for my studio, which was another factor for me, also from the business perspective, business side.
I mean, credit to you for taking on all these opportunities and experiencing kind of like the end-to-end production process, and then focusing again on Foley, but being able to provide everything else. I'm so curious, how would you break down the actual process? I'll give you an example. In my head, I've seen a video on someone, I think it was a short or a reel, of it was gameplay from The Legend of Zelda, and he was doing Foley sounds. I think before we actually met, I didn't realize it was called Foley, but he was doing like Zelda was running towards a cliff, so ta 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 ta. Then he jumps, the parachute comes out, you hear the sound of the wind. You hear like the parachute kind of fluffing up with like the weight of Link as he's going down, and it was all like the sequential step. How do you design for that if you're doing it, right? Like, are you writing it down on a piece of paper? Is this like kind of intuition, like let's try at this speed and trial and error? Like it feels like it's a science, but it's also an art at the same time.
So in general, when we work on a movie, there's different ways to approach it. However, I like to do like 3 passes. The first pass is the cloth movement pass. So I have my different types of clothing, and then I do all the motions of the people on screen and do all the cloth movement sounds and all the hand touch impacts and all the hand on body impacts. Those kind of sounds is one pass through the whole movie. Then I do another pass, do all the footsteps. And then once I'm done with that, I do all the spot effects or props, we call it. So the things I showed before, the glasses and the cutlery and all these different other objects, car touching and everything else that you can imagine.
This is all Foley? So every
Yes,
like when I'm watching a movie, like even like touching the steering wheel, or I don't know,
yes,
like you're at the dinner
100%.
table and you hear glasses like clinking together. That's not from the actual recording of itself. It's
Or
most
it
of it
is
is.
added, there's added Foley to it that it sounds more cinematic.
Oh wow. Okay. I'm gonna now look at these films and these games in a completely different way, because it's not what it seems, but that's how good it is because you don't notice.
Exactly. And then when it comes to a game, it's a bit of a different approach because even if it's a cinematic, nowadays in some games you can, as a player, walk through the cinematic as it plays for you. And you can change where you look at or even where you stand. So therefore, this also is way more interactive than it maybe used to be, where you're just like locked in at one place and then it plays really linear as a movie scene, right? But now it's not that case anymore. So if I'm tackling such a scene, I think more in object-based sounds. So I have 5 characters, and those 5 characters um, they will be as an object in the game, and maybe they have even different sound trigger points on their body. For example, the feet. They have a trigger point for the footsteps, but also the arms have some audio triggers. So when the character is moving, then the cloth movement gets triggered, right? And then as this scene might take a minute or two, I then go also into sections of those 2 minutes and export those sounds then different as in sections, because we don't want a 2-minute audio file to be triggered and then that uses a lot of memory. So it's all more technical and systemic. So we have to think more complex about it. And for example, then I also have those layers. Let's say when we talk about the Zelda thing, uh, the character is walking, so we do the footsteps. We maybe do also a bit of cloth rustle, and then everything the character has in their hands, we do a little like prop um, pass. So that's kind of similar, but we approach it differently. We don't approach it in this linear way that we make it work right away, because imagine a film scene. You have 5 people in a house, and they are all walking through different rooms of the house, and the camera is kind of following this person, then cutting to the next person, and then there's a top shot and you see many people walking at the same time. When we do this as Foley artists, we make it work right away. So we build that focus in. But in a game, I would go like more direct to each of those sound objects. Each of those 5 people is one sound object, and I would follow this sound object always in the same kind of static way. I wouldn't move it further away when it's moving further away in the capture that I have as a reference. I would always be close with that character, as it was the first person kind of thing that is always close to the player character, and you can see. And then all the rest gets handled by the game engine and the middleware. So there we have then RTPCs that control certain values, like attenuation curves of how far something is away, and depending on the distance it gets filtered and muffled. And then we have things like obstruction and occlusion. So when someone hides behind a certain object, let's say the character walks behind a wall, then the wall is kind of giving another factor of muffling and bringing it more into the back of the scenery. And these are all audio treatments that are being processed in runtime.
I swear, when you're talking about obfuscation and occlusion, I worked with a brilliant sound designer back at Jagex and Old School RuneScape, and we were trying to kind of think of, like if you were to walk into a pub from outside it's raining, and then the pub inside it's warm, and there's like this like fire cracking, and getting that sound mix. To me, it's just so important. I don't think we understand how immersive it can be, but we just kind of take it for granted. And just hearing you break down the process, there are a lot of technicalities. I don't know RSTC. I don't know what that means, but
RTPC.
RTCP, yeah.
RTPC, real time.
I know, but it shows you how technical it is. That
I don't do a lot of implementation. Therefore, yeah. I'm not so familiar with those things on a daily basis. But we have to put that correctly. Let me just. What is real-time player character? No, that doesn't make sense. What is an RTPC?
We can find it. Yeah.
Because otherwise, this is half information.
I love unveiling a good acronym.
Real-time parameter controls.
Okay, and the parameters are how the characters are moving through this world, and you're just controlling the different variables of sound. Is that a good way of putting it?
Yes.
Okay. Then I want to ask, then, you've done lots of movies and games. Can you give me an example of a really cool Foley sound you did for a movie, and then also one for a game? So maybe someone listening, like, they can imagine all the different things, but maybe like a cool example that they may know about, because you've done lots of great. You've done Wall-E, I've heard.
No.
Oh no, okay. Did I mix
Wall-E.
it up? Okay.
Wall-E was before my time, and I just used this as an example to show off a little bit about Foley on my Instagram. With Wall-E, what I showed there was, for example, the robot. I used like a drill with a battery drill, and attached it to a metal resonance chamber. And then you have this mechanical sound, but it has also this hollowness of the metal. And you get this resonance from the metal in addition to this motor. That was a fun thing to do. And for example, when you do those ambulance stretchers, that you have in, hospital scenes, or when someone is
When you're
like,
picking someone up, right? Like they're on the floor and you're picking them up on the stretcher,
yeah,
taking them off. Like let's say off like a football field, and like someone's got hurt.
yeah.
Like
And
there's
then
sound to that.
you put the stretcher, then it has wheels actually, right? And
Yeah,
you can then uh, shove it into
into the
the
back of the ambulance. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So this is always fun to do because yeah, you don't have such an item in the studio, right? So you improvise with certain elements, and I developed this over time with the tools I have in each studio. So I found out that actually I have this little tool where you can put a plant on, that has 4 wheels, and then you can kind of put your plant and move it swiftly through your room, right? This little metal object I can show you.
Okay. Oh wow. Okay, there it is. The 3 wheels, and you can put
Yeah,
anything on
there's
it, and
only
just
three
it'll
wheels.
simulate the
Yeah.
wheeling.
So now, when you just use this for an ambulance stretcher, it sounds very tiny and not realistic, right? It's just like a small piece, and an ambulance stretcher has a lot of weight, and there's a body on it, right? But then I found out in one of the last movies I did that I can use this isolated as one layer, and it actually gives a nice touch on the wheels themselves. And then you build up other layers that have more weight with more resonance. So I'm using a different piece with 4 wheels, and then put some metal on that and make then another layer of wheels, but more heavy. And then there's another layer maybe with a bit of rattling, and depending on what kind of ground the
What the surface?
stretcher
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's always fun to explore different things, and there's not this one kind of thing when I think about the movies that I did, which are like way more. I work way more on movies than on games. I worked 5 years at Ubisoft, and in that 5 years, the most outstanding thing that I did, and which brought me the most joy, was the harvesting system for Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. So in that game, you can harvest all different types of materials that are in this world of Pandora, and put it in your pouch, and then use it later on. So I think we had 17 different materials to cover, and a certain gameplay mechanic, again, that you have to kind of, it was kind of a gameplay situation that you had to find a sweet spot in order to make a good harvest, or a medium harvest, or a bad harvest, or maybe you even destroyed the thing while you did it so badly, right? So I had those different layers of complexity, not only the materials, but also the level of success while harvesting. So I recorded like a huge library of all different natural materials and different fruit and everything that I could find, and made like a huge sound library out of that. And from those sounds, I then designed all the different elements and all those sounds that were needed. And then we had a nice implementation cycle with the audio designer, and we made it kind of work in the game, and then we feedbacked it to the lead audio designers, and then they told us, yeah, maybe change here, change there, and then I recorded a little bit differently. And so we had to come up with like resin and bark and mushroom, and I like bought like a real huge mushroom and put a contact mic into it, and then kind of try to rip it apart so that you get this kind of mushroom like feeling, and then added other sounds to it to make it also work size wise. And then yeah, that was real fun.
And do you actually hear it? Like, can the audience tell what a mushroom sounds like when you're tearing it, or do you like do like some estimation to make it sound like we talked about the idea of sometimes an audience expects something to sound a certain way, even though in real life it doesn't, and you have to kind of conform to the expectation historically, but then also kind of what that sound actually sounds like. So, are you sometimes like swapping things out? Like, this is supposed to be the sound of bark coming off a tree, but we tried it with actual bark and it doesn't sound the way we expect the audience to expect it to sound. So we're going to substitute with something else, and that's close enough.
100%, yeah. Often that's not close enough. That's way closer than the original. That's
Mm.
also a huge thing in Foley in particular. And you use different materials for the actual real thing that you want to portray.
Let me ask then a high level but a sweeping question. Is Foley more about, or is the sound that you get from Foley more about simplicity or complexity? Like, are you mixing sounds together like the harvester? You told me there were fruits, grains. Are you trying to put them all together to create that realistic sound of mixing all of these harvest foods together? Or do you then say, okay, actually, it sounds better if it's just grain or it's just fruits, if that makes sense?
The clarity is more important.
Mm.
So you have to be very clear, especially when you talk about those gameplay feedbacks that the player actually has to understand. Was this a good harvest or a bad harvest? You know, you can make it visually, but also when you want to explain that or tell that story in the sound, you have to be very clear, very specific, and yeah, clarity over complexity. But it's very complex to get
I
that
get it.
clarity, if it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. Again, that's a tough question because nothing is binary in life, right? There are always overlaps and different ways of seeing things. When it comes to like, we talked a lot about online worlds, and that's usually like where I love to get into. When you have like lots of different players all moving around, and like let's take Red Dead Redemption 2. They have these Redem servers where players can come in, and you have like maybe 10 or 15 players all in the same environment, but there's a high level of fidelity with the sound. Like people are going through bushes and maybe their footsteps in the mud. How do you get that right when there's lots of instances of it? Because maybe in movies and maybe certain single player games, you can control the perspective of one character and like what sound that person's making. But what about when there's lots of different characters all at once?
Yeah, that is again the systemic approach of how to make a game sound great. So you have maybe a voice limit, and then you have another priority system of depending on what's actually going on. The priority system is measuring certain parameters again, and then decides what to play and what to leave out.
Okay, okay. And how should we think about Foley from the perspective of even maybe online worlds? Like, is there any difference, or is it more just about making sure it's realistic for the player at hand? I don't know if that makes sense, but just wondering your thoughts on: is there Foley in like a World of Warcraft? Is there Foley in EverQuest, or is Foley more reserved for high end games like a Red Dead Redemption 2 rather than kind of on other online games that are maybe lower sound quality? I'm not trying to say that they don't have good sound quality, but
Mm.
are there levels to Foley?
You know, Foley is in general always attached to characters, to humans, to moving characters on screen. It also can be a tank. Um, but there is always motion involved in Foley. And we can also do maybe Foley for UX and you know, cater to the
Okay.
design of that by just delivering some source material. And I think the highlight in Red Redemption 2 when it comes to Foley is way more than in a World of Warcraft. However, we can also help a World of Warcraft to give them some source material that they can use for their needs and their sound design. But we not in our kind of most familiar thing that we are doing, like cloth movement. You know, when those players are so far away. I worked on Anno 1800, for example, and in that game it's a bit similar. You know, you can zoom into the world and then you can zoom out and play it more like a top view game, and you know, have all your strategic things going and measure all your progress and what you need in order to, you know, progress to the next level and invade that island and whatnot. So the Foley was way more important when we did zoom into the world and got very close to the villages, and you had those little people Also the settlers we did, same kind of principle. The villagers then hammering on an anvil, or I don't know, the blacksmith working on a sword, or all those different sounds. We provided them only when you zoom in, but when you zoom out, it's way more ambience, UX, and sound effects like wind and music plays a huge role, of course.
Now, I'm imagining I've been rewatching Game of Thrones because I watched Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and I just thought of it again. It's just such a great show. Maybe the last two seasons of Game of Thrones not that great, but when you're picturing kind of that kind of moving camera through like a medieval town, the blacksmith. Now, when I go watch Game of Thrones, I'm going to realize that everything in there is Foley. When I'm rewatching, I'm on season 3 right now, and it just makes you think because it makes sense that when you're kind of more focused on a character or a scene, that's where Foley comes in, and that's where it's at its best. If you're playing like an RTS game where you're controlling armies of people, if you were to do Foley for every single army person in that game, like walking and interacting, it would just be too much for the person playing, right? Like going back to the idea of being complex in high level detail scenes, and then kind of trying to get more UX and simple if you zoom out, and it's just more about seeing a lot of things at the same time or not having that level of focus.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, so I want to ask then, from someone ignorant like me that doesn't know much about Foley, although I've learned so much in the last 40 minutes, has the technology changed for recording Foley? Like since you first met your master Yoda, your apprentice to your mentor, and now where you have your own school and everything, and you're doing this as a highly specialized person, has it changed that much?
Yes and no. I mean, in general, it's objects in a good sounding room recorded with microphones and a little bit of magic behind it, right? To make it sound bigger than life and all these kind of things.
Yeah.
And I think that was always the case. Of course, I think everyone who does that for a certain amount of time elevates their craft. So there's one thing I just implemented in my performance lately, and that is something I learned from the like thinking about games and working on games and like embracing those things like obstruction and occlusion as a technical thing. I now started, for example, because I have a relatively small studio which has around 30 square meters, but it is very long. It's almost like 10 meters long and only like 3 meters something wide, you know? So therefore, it's not an ideal room. And like really huge Foley studios that you have in Hollywood, or maybe I have one studio that I can access in Belgium, which is 400 square meters, like a huge cinema room, right? And you have like 6-8 meter ceiling. You have acoustic. You can manipulate the acoustics on the ceiling. For example, you have those motorized acoustic panels that you can switch and flop and kind of change the acoustic, and you have curtains that you can pull all around the room and change the acoustic from dry to wet, and all these kind of crazy things. But in my room, I'm a bit limited. I have a great sounding floor, which is very important. I have a very quiet surrounding, which is very important, but I have to deal with early reflections. And if I want to have something sounding very roomy, imagine like wood footsteps in a castle or in a huge mansion or something, like old mansion, then it's very difficult to come up with those sounds in my little room, because I have a lot of acoustic treatment in here to actually manage those early reflections that come from the walls so quickly, because it's only 3 meters away. So my microphone is in the middle of the room, so I have only 1.5 meters to the next wall, right? So the sounds that I'm producing in my room are bouncing off the wall and then very quickly coming back to the microphone, and that is something you don't want. Yeah, that is a pain you want to avoid. Therefore, you need a big room, to have the sound travel a long time to the wall, then getting absorbed at the wall, and then coming back to the microphone like almost nothing. So you have direct signal on the mic, right? And you don't have to close. It's very technical now, but that's actually the thing that people have to understand if they want to get into Foley, that you don't want the close miking kind of unnaturalistic, I'm going to the mic and it sounds very like, that's not natural. But how to come up with natural sound in such an environment that I have. And then I'm recording myself. So I don't have a mixer that actually handles the different microphones. You have a room mic that is more placed, far away. And then you have a close mic. And then you have two faders. Then you mix those against each other. And that's how you create the perspective, So when the character is moving away, the engineer is kind of moving the faders from the close mic to the far mic. And then it sounds like I'm moving away, although I'm stationary and I'm giving the same amount of energy, but it still sounds that I'm moving away. So how to come up with this as a one-man show? And then I used, to close the loop, obstruction and occlusion. So I have a little piece of furniture. And then once I need this kind of perspective change, I just move my body behind this piece of furniture and continue performing. And then the shelf gives me that perspective change that I actually need to make it sound more distant,
My God. So it's like, one, you have to be so creative with what you have. That's what I get. Like you are improvising and you're trying to innovate and you're trying to figure out like what you can do with the environment you have. And you're also kind of you're playing with the physics of sound. Like I always see game development as like you're in the game and you can kind of do what you want, right? You have a physics engine and everything, but it's all kind of virtual within kind of it's compute. And instead with sound, like you're playing with the physics of actual sound. If you need to get behind like a couch, you need the room to be a certain room. You need to change the way everything's reflecting off the walls. Like that's incredible. Like I never thought it that way, because you really have to. It's both the physics of real life, and then once you take that sound, manipulating it with the faders and like the electronics to then get exactly what you're looking for. But
that's very well summarized. And that's the actual art of Foley when we talk about movies. But then when we talk about games,
it's a whole other thing.
Forget about all this experiential and specialized knowledge of how to actually create these realisms in the studio. Because in the game, you don't want that. You don't want the distant sound. Maybe you need a little bit of that, of course. Let's say in the game, there's a system that caters for close-up sounds or more distant sounds. Yeah, okay. Then I record two pairs of sounds, right? One that is close-up and one that is more distant. For example, in Nexus VR, Assassin's Creed Nexus VR, we had because you are a first person into the world in different scenarios, but we didn't created some zones around the player. So there's like a very intimate zone that is almost like around your head, and then there's like a medium intimate space, and then there's a more far space, and then there's something that is really like not in your own like reach again. Yeah. And then we recorded different levels of closeness. So for example, when you pick up a knife, and it's on a metal shelf that is only in your hand's reach. So you have to really reach for that. That's maybe in the medium zone. And then the sound that we recorded is also, let's say, in a normal kind of distance to the mic. So that actually matches that already. Yeah. It's high quality, full frequency. We don't cut the high end and we don't play around with the things that we do for movies to make it work right away. But it's in general that kind of perspective match. However, when you then go and climb up something, and let's say there is like a knife that is on the surface there where you kind of reach and you're like almost there, and you grab the knife and you grab it like right next to your ear, Then we made like a special kind of sound for that, and actually put a contact mic on the knife and made it like really close, really big, like very like in your face, And the audio director loved that, that he was so amazed by this effect that when you do that, you actually feel that it's like in your ear,
Of course, because with VR you need that, like, because it's first person, you need to hear it as if it was right there. Like a game,
Yeah.
you might be playing third person and it could be a little bit different. It's a bit more far away. First person VR, it makes total sense.
Yeah, and that's what I love about games, because you can be very innovative. It's a long road to get good at Foley for movies. But then it's a whole different game to explore games and to try different things and again think out of the box and come up with other things that are not related to what you need when you work on movies.
Can I ask what type of mics you have? Because you mentioned contact mic. I feel like you have loads of different mics in your arsenal, depending on what you need to record, right?
Yes, for the normal work, I have three mics. One is the mic that I'm using right now here. It's a Neumann TLM 103. It's a big condenser cardioid microphone, just for voice recording, like very pristine, like good sounding microphone. But for Foley, for movies again, I'm using it a lot, like off axis. I'm not speaking always. I'm not performing directly into where the sound is most high fidelity. I often like turn it away from me and use it in the off-axis characteristics. That way I can play around and match into the film scene already. Then I have a shotgun microphone, which is also important because in movies you always have a shotgun. The boom operator holds the shotgun and records the
Okay.
dialogue.
In that way.
But
Yeah, okay.
sometimes you want to also use that kind of microphone to be very close to the dialogue. But at my current workflow, I don't use it most of the time for this particular reason. I'm actually using it as my room mic, which is completely doesn't make sense technically. But I found that because I have a small room, I put the mic as far away as possible and then let it point even away from me. So I have this kind of pointed sound into another like obstructed corner of my room where I have actually the feeling that there is some room sensation going on, even though I don't have like a 400 square meter, you know, playground where I can like change the acoustics to very vibrant and then I have like all the room that I want. Then I wouldn't go for that technique, but that's how I'm actually using it right now. And then I have a dynamic microphone, an SM7B. That's the podcast microphone you see always with podcasters, right? And that is something also we developed over time. I'm using for low end capturing. So if I want something to sound very heavy, I use this mic close to where the sound is actually happening. And then I'm treating this microphone again very heavily. So I cut all the high end, then I boost the low end. So the low frequencies get like a low boost of insane kind of 12 dB. This is like 4 times the normal volume added to this frequency range. And then I compress that even further with a vintage compressor. And if you listen to the sound that the mic gives on its own, it sounds like very muffled and undefined. But then again, I mix it together with my main mic, and then I can create something very special, very heavy, very, if someone walks passing the camera, I like to use that a lot. I love when someone is passing the camera, like a character is passing the camera, and you actually see, like,
You hear it.
yeah, then you hear it as well because I then move closer to the low end mic with my footsteps, for example, and then give it that little thud, and then you have this weight, exactly in that moment, and then I move away from the mic again, and then it all disappears and dissolves again.
I know that is so cool.
And then the thing for the games, I
Yeah.
have a few contact mics, but the coolest contact mic that I have is a so-called accelerometer. And it is a piezo pickup out of ceramics. And it's actually not meant to capture audio, but it's more for seismic measurement. So for industry, industrial plants or railroad tracks or whatever or other like small types of objects that in product development or whatever, or geologically you want to measure some eruption, seismic eruption or whatever, you use this and put it on an item, and then you can measure the the frequency,
Vibrations, yeah,
the
the
vibration.
frequency.
Yeah, 100%. So this one got advised by Tim Nielsen, who is a senior sound designer working also for Skywalker, and he has those couple of mic tutorials that he shares with some people. And I was fortunate enough to get a look at that when I was working at Ubisoft. And then he showed all his mics, and one of those was this contact mic, the accelerometer from HBK. And I thought, wow, this is amazing, we have to buy this. So we bought it for Ubisoft, and this thing is crazy because contact mics have a downside because they don't really capture the high-end frequency of things. It's more in the low, mid, and low-end area that you can capture things great. But then this accelerometer, Tim Nielsen took the time and tested very like more than a few of those, and then found the right one, because they're like, I don't know, 100 different options you have, right? And they're all not made for sound. And he found like the one that is actually great for sound. And this one has a linear frequency response to up to 20 kilohertz. So that's like the full frequency of our spectrum, that what we can hear. And it's just crazy when you put this on a sword or on a metal object or whatever. It gives you such a high resolution of the direct sound.
You can hear the sheath of the sword coming out, just like just like perfectly.
Yeah, but it's very close up and very pristine, high-end sounding version of it, which you cannot get with any other contact mic. It's a bit pricey. You get contact mics for, I don't know, $50, $100, but this thing is more like $2,500 or something. But yeah, definitely, like, I always, like, when I pick this thing up and work with it, I'm like always like, wow, this is so great. I love it. It's just like playground highlight.
I love it. You have all these amazing toys to play with, and I can just see how excited you are about just being able to record.
It's I love it. It's great.
It's amazing. I wanna ask a tough question. It's kind of hard to ignore, I think, for everyone, like what AI is doing and like how it's able to kind of really generate worlds, sounds, pictures, text, knowledge, you name it. How do you think about it with the work you're doing? I mean, from what it sounds like, it's all there's so much intuition, there's so much experimentation. You're actually working with the real physics of sound. So like, how do you see AI and its potential in the future, and how it could maybe affect Foley or sound design?
I don't have a real opinion here. I hear other people talking about it a lot. And I think most people agree that real artistry cannot be replaced. And I kind of feel that I can agree to this, because when I look at my work as a Foley artist, let's take this little like wood piece here, yeah? So
I love your props, yeah.
So I have a scene where I have to do something, and then I'm practicing the grab sound, the right resonance. Yeah, okay, mic in this position. Okay, now I'm good. Let's go. And then I record and I do something like completely different that I just practiced like 5 or 10 times. And that is the sound that I actually then yeah, that's great. Let's take this, way better than what I practiced. So how can the AI come up with this kind of things, this accidents? How can you train the AI to create those accidents? But on the other hand, it will be more and more a tool that people will use. And maybe there are certain levels of production that now use professional Foley artists that will not use professional Foley artists in the future, because they can cover it way cheaper with those elevated AI tools, and maybe a junior assistant sound effects editor, whatever, apprentice that can just do it, and it's good enough and no one complains about it. So why should they then pay us, as Foley is very expensive? I think with the high level productions, And wherever this will be, I don't know. What is the high level production? Let's say a TV movie with a budget of 1.5 million euros
Yeah, sure.
is now, let's say, a low budget kind of thing, but it still needs Foley, right? Will it need Foley in the future? I don't know. But 120 million Netflix production that will always need Foley, you know?
It needs that human touch. I completely agree. Again, it's something to think about. We don't know how it's going to turn out, but just based on this whole conversation we've had, like the level of the attention of detail you need, the intuition, the experimentation, like that's not something that can be done very easily. Even with,
and also
like,
it's the experience. You know,
Yeah.
you cannot come up with this right off the bat. You know, you like watch one YouTube tutorial about sound design.
You just get it. No way.
You need a lot of years, you know, to do this actually in order to understand what's going on. And now I have this intuition and I know, okay, I place the mic there and then I put and perform the sound here and then I get the right sound. But then again, it's day in, day out practice. In my studio now, in this studio, I'm here for 2 years now and I'm still learning how to actually do things. And then I have like a certain movie challenge, huge wood floor. And I know already from the last 2 years, approximately what I should do in order to come to a certain result, you know, but then new film, new challenge. And then I refine the process over and over and over again. And that's how you get better. And this doesn't mean, you know, I do this for 10 years full time and I learn every day. And that's what people have to understand if they want to work in this industry, that it's not a quick thing to, you know, to be good at that.
And now, like, you've really gone from kind of apprentice to teacher. Like, you've spent 10 years working, figuring out the craft. You met your Yoda, and then you started doing your own thing. And you're known, and I was introduced to you as the Foley teacher. So can you tell me more about how you've really started your own school and started teaching people the art of Foley?
Before I come to this, you have to understand that even you mentioned those 10 years of being a Foley artist. When I started to do my first Foley project, I was already 7 years into being a sound effects editor.
Exactly.
Or 5 years, you know, full time. So I mixed movies and I had like all this knowledge. So I knew kind of, when I started Foley, I already had 5 or 6 years of full-time experience working with Foley. So I kind of knew how it should sound in the edit process and how it should sound in the final mix stage. So I was already aware of what I was looking for, now exploring the Foley thing myself, operating props in the room, placing the mic, you know, but in my head, I already knew what sound I'm looking for, what actually would work on screen. But then the next challenge was how to produce that sound in order that it matches what I have already in my head. So imagine you start out and you don't have 6 years of full-time experience working with great people that tell you everything about the thing. So you learn from those people. Yeah, then you have to figure out what works on screen and how you can make it work in the studio. This is like 2 impossible tasks if you want success within a year or 2 years, you know? Yeah, like you will bang your head against the wall and produce like very low quality stuff that no one wants to work with, you know? So that's why I started the Foley Guild and why I wanted to be the Foley teacher. Because as you can see, I'm very enthusiastic about this topic and I experienced it when teaching at schools like SAE or other universities. Like opportunities came up, I took them, I taught a little bit about Foley, and then I always came out after the day very drained but very energized on the other side, you know, because it was so great to talk about the thing that I love to people who are actually interested. And then once I stopped working at Ubisoft, I already planned kind of, okay, if I go solo, I need to be like an influencer kind of thing, you know? I need to go on social media and present my work. Otherwise, I will not get hired because I knew that from the past. There was a time when I needed money for some like things in my like tooth, like dentist work that is very expensive. So I needed like 3,000-4,000 euros. And I wanted to just take on a little side hustle job and do another Foley edit, in my little like home studio I had back then while I was working at Ubisoft, which was totally fine with them. I had a contract written up with them that I can do film work at the side, whatever. But then to find a gig, it took me forever. I reached out to all my contacts and no one had actually worked for me. So I thought, okay, I now had 10 years of working in an industry and knowing a lot of people, but still, if I need one job, I cannot get it right away. And so then going solo full on with no backup plan, I was aware that in these days you need social media to be visible, and I actually wanted to do this. So I built my first studio already with planning all the lighting and putting the cameras, and this was all like, yeah, I want to do this. And then the Foley Teacher name came kind of natural. Full story. There was one Foley artist, Joanna Fang, who actually also works in games. I think there was a time where she and myself were the only people that had this title, like Senior Foley Artist at a AAA game studio. And she has her Instagram handle like _Foley_artist, And then I saw that and I thought, yeah, why not calling my account the _Foley_teacher, And that's then how the whole thing came up. And yeah. Then finding the right way to teach things is also a journey I'm still on. So the first year I did one-on-one coaching for people who actually wanted to use their home studio to also create sound effects and Foley and stuff that is very difficult to record in such an environment, as I already explained. So I helped maybe 10 people doing this in this one-on-one coaching thing, which was a great success for me because I started off, I made my first 10K online, and I thought, yeah, that's great. So I'm telling you the long story. So
yeah, no, it's okay.
Then there was like a free movie I worked on, because my dentist, by the way, is a very cool guy who's also an actor and who used to be a rapper, whatever. So he has also a little bit of interest in producing movies, and one of his friends is a director. And so he asked me once I was there, maybe you want to connect with my friend who's a director who works on his first feature film, and maybe you can collaborate. So I did a collaboration with this director and worked on his movie for free. And in return, a year later, he was on the phone with me and said, dude, you should start like an academy, you have to teach this on a broader scale. And that really got me thinking and motivated. Like I was kind of, when I dig into something, I'm kind of like, okay, this is now the thing, and I cannot let go of it until I see it, And that was the case then. So I off the ground started my Pro Audio Academy, and the aim was to help people to get into the industry. And I thought I can scale this right away with all the knowledge I have, so I can teach dialogue editing, sound effects editing, sound design, Foley, mixing for movies and games, like all the stuff that I basically know, realizing that this doesn't work when you just start out. So I had like 10 people that joined, and we did a whole beta testing year. Usually when you build a community, you have like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks of beta testing, and then you go already in launch phase. I did a whole year of beta testing only to find out that I don't want the Pro Audio Academy that already caters to everything that I know. I want to double down and help people get into Foley and understand how to record great sounds. And that's why then I rebranded the whole thing into the Foley Guild. And that is still something I am building. So I want to help people to get into Foley as a professional, or to elevate in a career as a sound designer by recording more unique sounds, even in your home studio. Because I have those techniques that you can come up with great results that people can produce in a Foley stage in your home studio. And then with my guidance, I can be already that mentor that helps people to actually elevate to that level that you need in order to you sell this, that you can make money with this, that you can make a living from that. And Foley is the thing that you need a mentor. In France, you have to be apprentice to someone almost for 10 years before you can even call yourself a Foley artist.
Wow.
And so if people want to learn that and they don't have that on-site mentor that they can learn from, I want to provide that service to people that they can actually do it themselves, individually in their small, non-ideal environments. And if they're really dedicated and do the thing every day, they can come up with great results in less time than 10 years.
What was the hardest part about building this online school?
Understanding everything about online marketing, business, copywriting. The guy that I learned a lot from, just having 2 conversations with him, is Akash Takar, who is, for me, the GOAT of online education in the game audio space. Yeah, he's doing that for 7, 8 years now, maybe 10 years already. And he's younger than me. Starting out with YouTube and then building an email list and then doing those cohort-based courses and having some online courses. And I was on a podcast with him 2.5 years ago. I just reached out to him because I saw he has a great podcast. I want to be on the show. So I just asked him, do you want to be, can I be on your podcast? Because I already had those 40K subscribers on Instagram back then. And he said, yes. We had the conversation, and then he told me about certain things, about this platform called Circle and how he do his cohort-based courses. And I just listened, and I was already in this field like, okay, I want to do this, but it was kind of hitting a wall, when he told me that. And then now 2.5 years later, I have my own Circle community already running for 1 year. I have my own website that is actually designed in a way that it explains the problem that people have before actually offering a solution. So copywriting, Akash said, become a good writer. He said he spent hundreds of hours of learning how to write properly and doing courses on writing, because if you write a good email, you can sell way better. If you can write a good caption for your video or a good title for your YouTube, it's a huge asset. And that's actually the thing that you need when you want to do this kind of business. And to be honest, it's an ongoing process that I can't kind of let go, and I have to always dig deeper. I'm in a community of online professional creators. It's called The Lab. Shout outs to Jay Claus, who's running that. And there I learned a ton, because this community has 250 professional creators who either have more than 10,000 followers or earn more than 10,000 per month with online services. So non-service business, non-service type of business. Yeah. And so there are so many great people in there I can learn from. There are experiments shared, and yeah.
It's amazing. It's a whole community.
Crazy, like how difficult, or to me, it still feels difficult to get this thing properly out in the world, and not doubting the people that they don't want to, pay for anything, or not doubting myself that I cannot provide anything. But it's really that craft of how to communicate things to people efficiently, that they understand that this is for them.
Yeah, you're putting yourself out there. It's
okay, I did that at least. I built some trust now for the last couple of years. This is great. I get great feedback from people telling me that, hey, I learned so much from you over those years now, and thank you. And so that's all there. But now, why do people do not know that I have this Foley Guild and that they could actually, go to the next level. Either they don't need it, which I don't doubt, because there are certainly people who want to get into Foley. So it's about the communication and about the consistency in telling people about it in the best possible way. You don't want to be a salesperson when it comes to that.
How do you feel about your journey from kind of the start of this conversation, where you told me that you wanted to be like a rapper or a hip hop artist, and now you're here with your own course. You've worked on games, you've worked on movies, you've done, to me, 360 degrees around sound, but now you focus into a craft. Like, looking back at your journey, how do you feel about it? How do you look at yourself?
It's a great question, to be honest, because sometimes I think I still want that rap thing, I really want that to be something that I can also be of service to other people, because I honed the skill of rapping properly, and I can freestyle and improvise. I did that for so many years and so passionately. I believe I'm, very, very good at that. And I love it so much, maybe even more as this whole like Foley game. But I can't do it because I don't have the time for it, or at least I don't have the priority on this right now. So I don't take the time to do it properly. But now understanding what it actually takes to run something on social and to become known for something, I kind of don't see myself right now stepping into this field and giving it a shot, because I want to go on with the Foley Guild and with my freelance work as a Foley artist, and I want to work on more projects and better projects and higher budget stuff. So I have my goals there, and I have the pathway to do this. There's like a very realistic pathway that if I continue, I can reach these things. And then there's always this question: why did it work out with the Foley thing and the sound design and the movies and the games, but not with the music? And that's where my trust in Allah comes in, that I'm 100% sure that this was the right thing for me, that the divine wisdom has guided me and gave me these opportunities, and the other opportunities, they weren't on the table until now. Having said that, I still hope and pray for that there will be a time in my life where I can actually do this music thing again. And then if it doesn't happen, I'm also, happy with it.
I love the idea of like a divine plan. Just sometimes when you try to force things, it doesn't happen. You have to kind of interpret the way the journey opens up in front of you as something that's sometimes often out of your control. You just do the best of what you have. I remember before starting this podcast, I was thinking I either go do stand-up comedy or I do my podcast. And I knew in my head that I can't do both. Because like you said, starting any kind of venture is so much effort. You have to set everything up. You have to get your name out there. You have to write content, think of titles, learn how to actually record a podcast, create your community, and then kind of there's just so much to it. And when I think back, like, would I ever have the chance to do stand-up comedy? I always think, there's a plan for it. Who knows? Like, life is long, and maybe I'll return to it someday. But I just love how open you are to everything and how you kind of see and interpret your journey in life, because we can only do so much.
Yeah, but life is long.
Exactly.
If he allows it to be long, life can also be short.
Exactly.
You never know that. And that's the thing where I want to be, that, the place I want to be in is like to be comfortable with the situation I'm in. I don't want to regret that I'm not the rapper. It wasn't on the plan. Maybe it is in the plan in the future, but maybe my life ends today. So, what is it really about? It's not about what you did. It's more like how you pleased your Lord, to be honest, what's the divine plan for you, and what's the potential that your creator gave you, and did you actually follow up and execute on that and reached your full potential? That's way more what I think that gives this kind of what's that word for it, to be comfortable, to be content. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for.
Grateful.
Yeah, grateful, but also content with yourself. Like, you're not, I don't have to
Satisfied,
doubt
yeah.
myself,
Absolutely.
why not the rap thing? I'm such a great rapper. I want to just do it. I don't want to even show it the world and get my recognition and the props from the hip hop world anymore. I just want to do it. Yeah, but there's no pathway for me right now. So what? It's what it is. I can still rap in my car or whatever, and do it from time to time, and get the practice in. But I'm not Harry Mack, and I love Harry Mack. You know Harry Mack?
No, who's Harry Mack? Because I know hip hop. I love hip hop, so I don't know
You
who
have,
Harry
you
Mack
have
is
to
though.
check Harry Mack, because he's the goat of freestyle rapping.
Okay.
And he came up with that social media channel a couple of years ago. And yeah, this is like the greatest thing I ever witnessed when it comes to freestyle rapping. And only to see this motivated me to do more again with this whole thing. It didn't really bring me to the level I want to be, but then for me, what I like, how I think about things. There's a Harry Mack who spent the last 10, 15 years only doing freestyle rapping, like 8 hours a day, let's say, right?
Yeah.
And I spent my last 15 years doing Foley and sound design 8 hours a day. So how can I be as good as Harry Mack, even though I had 7 years before where I only did freestyle rapping? Yeah, there was a 15 years break where I focused on other things, So I know that I could be maybe on my own way as good as Harry Mack, but it would need 8 hours of practice for the next 3 years. And that's also what I want to tell my students. If you want to be good at something, you have to invest yourself and you have to really go for it. Otherwise, there are people like me who are like doing it every day, and I'm better, even if you're more talented.
And then some things can just be for you. I love the idea that you love rapping, you love freestyle, but you recognize that that's maybe not something that you can do to the level of a Harry Mack, or to getting like
Yeah, even though I
album out
want
there.
that,
Even though you want that, but you also kind of appreciative of the fact that I can still do this and it can still be for me. I can do it in the car, I can do it with friends, I can meet up with people, I can maybe just record something, but it doesn't have to be. I think everyone has these expectations of whatever you do has to be like full max. Like I've got to make a record, I have to go on Spotify, and maybe sometimes like the nice things in life are just for you and just for the people you love, and that's okay. It's not the end of the world, because you're focusing on something else, and we can't do everything. Like you
yeah,
can only.
100%.
It's I wanna ask you, Bastian, what advice do you have for someone listening who is maybe a sound designer, maybe they're studying, and they want to do Foley, or they want to kind of work in the areas that you have? What advice do you have for someone listening?
Really think about if you actually are 100% passionate about this, or if it's just a phase in your life. It's also okay if it's a phase, but then you might not get very far. Then work every day on your craft, no matter if you get paid for it or not. Find people to collaborate with, whether it's student films or game jams. And then ideally find a great mentor or mentors that are willing to share what they know and get feedback from what you did and elevate on that feedback, take it in. I got feedback from people that I hated. And I felt like these people, they treat me like I was a first year student, although I was already 10 years in the game, you know? But did I dismiss this feedback? No, I doubted. I took that feedback in, and it actually helped me to get better, even though it felt very, very disrespectful when I received it, but I asked for it, And other feedback that I got from mentors, it was those 5 minutes sitting down with a re-recording mixer, looking over my sound design, telling me how to actually design ambient sounds properly, that I will never forget, and that I base on my whole knowledge. And then all the years of practice with that knowledge made me the sound designer I am today, Same for Foley editing. I was sitting down editing Foley for a long film, which actually got me into a nervous breakdown at the end. But at the beginning of this, I didn't know what to do, messed up everything. Then my mentor came, sat down, restarted the whole project, and showed me just 5 minutes how I should do this. And that's the best lesson that I ever got, and the fundament of how I still think of Foley editing today. Yeah. So find yourself a mentor and do the work.
Who are your before we go, top 3 or top 5 hip hop artists? I know there's Harry Mack, but I have to ask.
Okay. Oh, this is such a.
I know it's a tough one, and just give me, maybe it doesn't have to be top 5, doesn't have to be in an order. Just give me.
So artists. It's definitely Talib Kweli for his Reflection Eternal album, which I can hear to this day. When I'm tired in the car and I fall asleep, I put on this album and I can drive. Then his partner in crime, Mos Def, Yasin Bey. I also have a lot of respect.
I saw him live. I love Yasin Bey. Yeah, he's incredible.
I met him actually in Cape Town once. Yeah,
that's so cool.
And tons of other people, but I don't know where to start, to be honest. So many people come to my mind.
That shows how much you love the genre, which I think is beautiful, genuinely. Like, if you were just to list it right away, I know my top 5 right away. It's like, no, it's like you can't. Those top 5 games, like if you have to list your favorite movies or games, if you really love it, it's a hard question.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time, man. I appreciate it.
It's been a blast. I love chatting to you. Look, this is Bastien Gerner, the Foley Teacher. Check out his YouTube channel, his school. I'm going to put everything in the description below. But Bastian, thanks again for joining.
Thank you, Alessandro.